we all want to be satisfied, right? We want to have a fulfilling sex life, whatever that looks like for you. But I think there's no denying that it's a universal truth that we want a fulfilling sex life. So as someone that studies like specific behaviors, sex behaviors like communication and interaction, and how do you translate your values and beliefs into how you express yourself, is I look into what are some of the variables that predict that? What are some of the variables that contribute into long-term sexual satisfaction and fulfillment? According to multiple papers and multiple studies, sexual communication is the number one predictor of long-term satisfaction. There's no satisfaction without communicating. I'm learning that, the best type of communication is the proactive and engaging type of communication. It's talking about different sex topics before any kind of issues come up. And the alarming part about studying this is the more I interview people or have people do my surveys, the more I realize that most people don't talk about sex.
I'm Cindy Darnell. Welcome to The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we examine and explore sex and relationships through social, personal, cultural, scientific, political, and other lenses, and unpack and explore your erotic quandaries with the world's wisest erotic philosopher. Hello, welcome back to Season 4 of The Erotic Philosopher, the podcast where we explore life, sex, and modern relationships with some of the world's wisest erotic philosophers. My name is Cindy Darnell. I'm a sexologist, sex and relationships therapist and coach, and of course I am the host of The Erotic Philosopher. I am also the author of Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, the truth about mismatched libido and rediscovering desire. You can find out more about me at my website, cindydarnell.com. Before I jump into today's interview, I want to tell you about a new project I'm working on, my online subscription community where you can learn more about the issues we tackle here on The Erotic Philosopher, be they relational, personal, emotional, sexual, and beyond. So many of us need support and scaffolding, making sense of our complicated lives and relationships these days. So this new online community serves as a portal to learn more from me and others as we dive into the issues most important to us in creating meaningful lives and fulfilling sex. You'll see more on my website, cindydarnell.com, under the Community tab. Now on to today's guest, Dr. Tara Suwinyattichaiporn, a sex and relationship expert, tenured professor, relationship coach at lovebites.co, and host of Love Bites by Dr. Tara podcast, with a bustling social media presence on TikTok. From a shy immigrant from Thailand to a confident sexpert, her goal is to normalize talking about sex in a healthy and fun way. In this episode, we learn about Dr. Tara's research into sexual communication, and we explore what makes sex fulfilling no matter the stage of life you're at and what you're into. Dr. Tara asks me about my experiences of erotic mindfulness, and I share my own relationship with low libido and the inspiration behind writing my book. A couple of steps back from the gravitas of our more recent episodes, this is a light-hearted discussion with Dr. Tara that offers us a little levity. Dr. Tara, welcome to The Erotic Philosopher. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And before we get into our conversation today, what would you like the Erotic Philosopher listeners to know about you that they might not know already?
Something that a lot of people don't know is English is not my first language. Thai is my first language. So sometimes when, I'm on a podcast or TV or teaching, I'll go, wait a second, what is that word in English? And they're kind of shocked. Like, what do you mean? What's that word in English? Is English not your language? I'm like, no, I learned English as an adult.
You learned it as an adult?
Well, I mean, teenagers.
Okay, but still, I mean, that's a complex feat. I think I started learning Spanish when I was in my early 20s, and then I sort of got to an intermediate level with it, and then it, all fell apart. And then I went to Mexico earlier this year for the first time, and that was the first time I spoke Spanish in about 25 years. I had not used it for 25 years, and I was talking like a preschooler, and it was just like completely embarrassing. But So, hats off to you. I can't imagine what it must be like getting, into academia at PhD level in a language that's not your first language, and a language that's so vastly different to English. Thai is just a whole world unto its own. So
Yeah.
hats off
Thank
to you,
you.
Dr. Tara. I appreciate it. So let's get into, before we get into your academic work, let's get into your personal background then. So you're from Thailand, which before we started recording, I was telling you is one of my favorite countries in the world, not just because I'm Australian and Australians do love Thailand. But I love the food. I love the people. I love the sense of humor. I love how the Thai people, to me, they seem to have there's a robustness of culture that is very distinct from so many of the other Asian countries in my observation. And there's just some magic, I think, that happens in Thailand that I haven't experienced in any other countries in that part of the world. So tell us about growing up in Bangkok, or was it Bangkok where you grew up, or whereabouts in Thailand?
Bangkok. Thanks for the kind words. I always love hearing foreigners talking about how much they love Thailand. I'm very proud to be Thai and to be from Thailand. I grew up in the middle of Bangkok, very busy city. And you're in New York. So I would say it's kind of like Asian New York.
Have often described Bangkok as the New York of Asia. It has that kind of feel to it in that it's, a big, busy, city, and it's very permissive. And there are pockets of it that are very wealthy. There are pockets of it that are very poor. It's pretty kind of diverse, and it's just 24/7. There is just activity. It is the city that never sleeps.
Exactly. It's always buzzing. So I'm, in the context of how I grew up, I'm not small town girl, have never seen sexual cues. I grew up super busy city. I mean, I'm bombarded by different messages, different advertising, and just, lights, nightlife and things like that. I'm familiar with. So that's kind of the scene I grew up in. I would say growing up in Bangkok has been something of a confusion for myself, because I grew up going to an all-girls school and a Catholic school.
So your family were Catholic, or you just went to a Catholic school?
They just sent me to a Catholic school. And our principal was a nun.
Wow. Thai?
Yeah.
Or European?
Some of them are Thai, some of them are Filipino, because there's a lot of Catholic Filipinos.
Right.
Yeah. But my principal was a nun. A lot of the admin people were nuns. So, going to school with nuns, going to Catholic school and talking about God, Jesus, Mary, things like that as a young person in Thailand.
But your family were practicing Buddhism at home, or were they atheists or agnostics at home?
Buddhism.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're really different, the heaviness of Catholicism in contrast with the kind of, come as you are attitude
mindfulness
of Buddhism.
Yeah. We're heavy, we're intense Buddhists. We go to temples once or twice a week. We give offerings. We do all the Buddhism practices that people do. I was sent to a meditation camp, a week-long meditation camp as a 5th grader. We're intense practicing Buddhists. But at the same time, I was going to school, and every single day, 5 days a week, we're taught these Catholic thoughts and beliefs and values, right? And then pray to Mary. So it was a lot. And on top of that, becoming, hitting puberty and becoming a teenager with curious, sex thoughts where your only peers were girls. So when I hit puberty, I fully thought I was a lesbian. because I was exposed to girls and I had feelings for girls and I was attracted to a girl and I dated a girl and we made out. And that was like my first sexual experience was with a girl, and we made out. She gave me a hickey. We were girlfriends for a little bit. So that was like my first introduction to like relationships, love, sex.
Yeah, through that Catholic lens of not being allowed to have permission, but then in a hotbed of young women full of hormones.
Curious, horny. Yeah. And meanwhile, nuns would like hit us on the wrist or the hands if our skirt ever comes above the knees. So there's a lot of things going on.
Okay. And so you're Buddhist at home, Catholics at school, and then it sounds like pretty sex negative and pretty, an uptight version of Catholicism. I don't know if there is a less uptight version of Catholicism. I wasn't raised Catholic. I don't know a whole lot about it. I probably know more about Buddhism than I know about Catholicism, just because I'm interested in it.
Are you a Buddhist?
No, I'm not. But I sort of tilt that way because I've read about it and I find the philosophy of Buddhism very, very enriching. There are some aspects, I think, of the way it's practiced in certain countries and certain contexts that I think are not so great. But I would say that about all religions, that it can, when it's used for a political gain, I think it loses its mysticism and transcendent qualities and becomes about power and control, which I think at that point it ceases to even be about spirituality. But as a practice and a tradition that helps people feel less shit, I think it's probably the best.
I think so too. Yeah. Feel less shit for sure.
And like to feel less shit. If that's the purpose of Buddhism, is to feel less shit. I think it's great for that. It does a very good job of that.
People often ask me, like, growing up a Buddhist, what was the best thing about it? I always say learning the meditation practice. That was the best thing. Not necessarily like the 5 truths to follow or other things, but like just learning how to sit still.
Right. And what a wonderful thing for everybody to learn, whether you're a small child or a 50-year-old. It's still a handy skill to be able to just slow the fuck down and be with your thoughts and be with your experience. So that sounds like a pretty wild ride then for you as a kid growing up in Thailand, that you've got the Buddhist thing on one side, the Catholic thing on the other side. And then, my understanding too of Thai culture is that as much as it's very sort of permissive and there's a certain glee and happiness that seems to be embedded in the Thai culture, my understanding is it's also quite conservative at another level.
It's very conservative.
So how did that impact you then when you've got these hot kind of, lesbian vibes happening as a teenager, and then you're in the middle of this heavy conservative scene? What was that like for you?
I love that you had observed that and you mentioned this, because most foreigners think that Thailand is very sexual because of the sex tourism scene in media. Movies often portray Thailand as like the destination for lustful things, right? Illegal gambling, red light district, prostitutes, like all these things, right? This is where you go and get a happy ending massage or fuck a sex worker. Like that's what, if you didn't study it or didn't read more or haven't really gone there to really experience the culture and the locals, you wouldn't know. You would think that Thailand's super sexual. Like, oh, wow, you grew up in Thailand. Like, what's that like? Like, that's the land of like sex tourism. It has no effects on me because I grew up as a local. And as a local Thai culture is very conservative. As a woman, you don't have that many rights. Just to put it out there. And it's the truth. And anyone want to fight me for it? Give me real examples of like Thai woman in real power. Like that's not a thing. You're a wife. That's your job.
Okay. So even still now, you think in this contemporary era, even the younger women in Thailand, you don't see much social change. There's not sort of a bubbling unrest of women kind of rising up in the next generation?
It's I would say it's like pockets of young women, and these are like the pocket the one pocket that I'm talking about is wealthy kids that went to study abroad.
Okay, so you're exposed to Western thinking,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
become exposed to feminism and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
more
A lot of
progressive values.
wealthy families will send their kids to Australia, New Zealand, England, and America to study. And from studying, they think like, oh, they will get, great education, come back, improve the country. But with this, a lot of women will learn feminism and more women's rights and like thriving to the top of whatever they want to do rather than just be a wife. And so when they come home, same with me. Like when we go home, we, talk about these ideas and like wanting to start, for example, a startup. Like most startups are started by men in Thailand, like 95%.
I think that's probably true in most of the world, huh?
I would say so. Yeah, we're still improving. But in Thailand, it's like there's such limited opportunities for women. What I'm doing right now is absolutely not acceptable in Thailand. There's no sex therapist. There's no sex coach, no talking about sex, especially from like a woman's perspective. Like, how can we feel more pleasure? Hell no. It's about like, how do you serve your husband better? And that's the truth. And, I as much as I do like talking about it, I also don't like talking about it because then I feel bad. I'm bashing my culture,
Right. And I can understand that. And I can see how there would be conflict there, especially because with Thai culture in particular, there's, obviously a long legacy, a long history of, suffrage and resistance to, political colonialism. That my understanding is Thailand is one of the only countries in Asia that has not been colonized, that remains independent to this day, which is, again, amazing. And we can still, you can still critique the culture from the inside and say, well, there are great things about Thailand and there are also shit things about Thailand. And that doesn't mean that Thailand's not fabulous. It is a contrasting cultural hot pot of all kinds of things. I guess in many ways, a lot of countries are like that too. The US certainly is. Australia definitely is. I don't think anywhere on the planet is perfect. But I think what you have achieved, especially in the context that you're coming from, is especially unique because you are the only Thai sexologist I've ever met. And there are very few even Asian sexologists that I know of, maybe a handful. So for you to be talking about sex in the West, at least, and then, how much does your work then stretch back to Thailand? Do you regularly appear in the media in Thailand? They're not interested?
No, it's not welcomed.
Yeah. Okay.
No, Thailand is not there yet.
So how does your family feel about the work that you're doing? Because you're an accomplished sexologist. You're at a very high level, and working at which university are you tenured at?
I'm at California State University, Fullerton.
Okay, right. So this is a really, phenomenal achievement for anybody, but particularly for somebody who learned English as a second language as a young adult and then to leave their country of origin and come and pursue sexology in a country that has a pretty twisted relationship with sex anyway, the United States. So, that's quite a feat, what you've done with all of this. So let's pivot now into your work and, the study that you've done on sexual communication. So talk us through the study itself, and then we'll sort of move on into your findings, what you've discovered about sexual communication and how that can be useful sort of out in the wider world.
Yeah, I'm actually inspired by my parents for this study. Like, even though my parents weren't like extremely supportive about me studying sex and talking about sex this widely and, basically I get very raunchy, like on my podcast or on my TikTok. My dad doesn't ever talk about it. Like he just pretends like I'm a professor of like social science. And when people ask him, like, what does she teach? He just goes like, just human behavior. And what kind of behavior? He's like, I don't know, just behavior. But my mom is becoming a little bit more accepting and excited about my accomplishments. Like, when I'm on the news, like talking about, sexy times this fall, she's very excited about that. And, she's becoming a little bit more accepting, but she's learning, she's coming from, she was an immigrant to Thailand. So she's not Thai. She was an immigrant to Thailand. She grew up very strict.
Where's she from, your mom?
She's originally from Kanto, like I guess Hong Kong. She grew up very strict. And like for her, sex has always been like serving your husband. Like it's not a pleasure. It's not something that empowered women do. She just kind of like focused on work and, she's a very accomplished woman. But when I started thinking about like, what should I study in the realm of sexual communication and like, what is it that people ultimately want when it comes to sex is we all want to be satisfied, right? Like we want to have a fulfilling sex life, whatever that looks like for you. But I think there's no denying that it's a universal truth that we want a fulfilling sex life. So as someone that studies like specific behaviors, sex behaviors like communication and interaction and how do you translate your values and beliefs into how you express yourself, is I look into what are some of the variables that predict that? Like what are some of the variables that contribute into long-term sexual satisfaction and fulfillment? And I say I was inspired by my parents because my mom has never, ever, ever, ever talked about sex. So in my mind, I'm like, you must not be fulfilled because according to multiple papers and multiple studies, sexual communication is the number one predictor of long-term satisfaction. There's no satisfaction without communicating. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, my mom must not be very sexually happy. And there was one day that I actually asked her after like 2 glasses of wine as an adult to another woman adult. I'm like, are you guys having sex? Mom's like, hell no. We haven't had sex for a long time. And I'm like, do you like have pleasure? Do you masturbate? It's like, no, I don't have to. Right. I'm like, what do you mean you don't have to? She's like, no, I don't. And I mean, we don't have to talk about this. And I'm like, no, I want to talk about this. She's like, I'm not comfortable talking about this. So then I'm like, ooh, I want to study this because as a how old is she? 62-year-old woman can't talk about sex. Like, let's unpack that. Like, what has led you up to that? And so I started reading more and more and doing a literature review, more and more of like the different sexual communication styles and what types of like personality, and values contribute to these different styles. And then basically what style predicts long-term fulfillment. And I mean, as listeners that are already sex enthusiasts, and Cindy, you're one of the experts, like you already know that an active and engaging communication style is the best, right? The proactive style. Talk about sex before you have issues, right? So that's what I found is, through like combing through different types of literature, from sociology, human behavior, psychology, anthropology, history, I'm learning that, the best type of communication is the proactive and engaging type of communication. It's talking about different sex topics before any kind of issues come up. And the alarming part about studying this is the more I interview people or have people do my surveys, the more I realize that most people don't talk about sex.
Right. And so the people who are your sample size, are they students? Are they young people? Who are the people you're getting the data from?
So my survey study is based on 5,000 people of age range from 18 to 60.
Okay. So it's a pretty big, okay.
It is a really big sample. I use Snowball. So I had people help me recruit from different communities.
Yeah. Okay. So you had a cross section of ages and genders then. and cultural backgrounds, that kind of thing too. Yeah.
Different racial background, different sexual orientation. I have a very diverse sample for my survey. But for my interviews, I had 12. I started with 12 interviews of people of different sexual orientation and different racial background. And then from then on, I started 2 focus groups, which is like kind of bouncing off of the ideas I learned from literature review and talking to the 12 people.
And then did you find that there were certain groups or certain subcategories of people who were already sort of taking on some of these sexual communication values about being proactive in initiating conversations? Are there certain groups that are already doing this much more readily than others?
Queer men.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be the answer. That would not surprise me. Why do you think that is?
Based on literature, it's because the process of reflecting on your own sexuality and sexual orientation and then planning your coming out is a lot of thinking about sex and thinking about how to express it. So you kind of you already have this foundation of how to approach a sex topic, which is, you started with learning how to share your news, how to count the coming out. So I think that having that foundation then translated into talking about your sexual preferences, talking about your kink, talking about opening up your relationship or changing the relationship structure or exclusivity becomes a little bit, I'm not saying easy, but just a little bit less challenging than other people.
Right.
The toughest people talking about sexual preferences and really the real sex issues are straight men. Heterosexual men are not talking about sex. And even when they do, they tend to talk about what is socially acceptable.
I hope you're enjoying this episode of The Erotic Philosopher as much as I enjoy bringing it to you. I love being able to introduce these guests from around the world to you, and in return, it would help me enormously if you would go to Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts and leave The Erotic Philosopher a rating and review. Your labor there helps this podcast land in front of people's eyes and ears, and what better way to help create a more inclusive and supportive world than spreading more information to more people, and you'd be doing a great favor to me too. If you would like to find out more about working with me, head over to my website, that's cindydarnell.com, where you'll see my offerings as a therapist or coach for a streamlined and personalized service, plus my online pleasure school under the online courses tab, where you'll find a suite of pre-recorded classes ready to go. There's something there for everyone. You'll also find my online community under the community tab, where you can join me and others just like you navigate the topics we discuss here on The Erotic Philosopher and so much more. There's no shame in needing support to better understand these complex parts of our lives, and I am here to support you every step of the way. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at The Erotic Philos, that's PHILOS. You can also follow me on social media. I am at Cindy, CYNDI_DARNELL on Instagram, TikTok, and on Twitter. Thanks for joining us here today, and now let's get back to the episode. So let's sort of dig into that a little bit, because I think that this is sort of the next frontier of social change around sex, is not only looking at the systems around why straight men won't talk about sex, but also what kinds of things enable them to start talking about sex. What are some of the hurdles they need to get over at an individual level? So we understand that there's the social aspect of, needing to appear manly and needing to appear like you've got your shit together and needing to appear like you have everything under control. And also, I think the false narrative that men are just these, happy horn dogs who you just put the coin in the slot and they're ready to fuck, they're just ready to go. And I know, and I'm sure you have found in your research too, that is not true. There are some men like that some of the time, sure. But there are a lot of men who are not like that. And that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to, get married and have babies and live in the suburbs either. There's the whole spectrum along the middle. But because certainly in most cultures, the version of masculinity that is fed to us is very narrow, and it is either, he's this very successful, wealthy businessman type, or he's the sports star type. And both of those archetypes are centered around him, being this virile fuck dog with absolutely no inquiry into what brings him pleasure, genuinely, and absolutely no inquiry into why he might struggle to even initiate a conversation around that. So what are some of the things that you've observed that straight men struggle with the most in getting over these social expectations?
I think it's their lack of vulnerability, not knowing how to approach vulnerability. How can I even get started sharing the one thing that concerns me sexually when I'm too afraid to be vulnerable? I think that's the biggest issue. And I mean, we can even dig deeper to where that comes from. And I think you already gave this social commentary about how like men are expected to be this masculine, goal-oriented, striving, successful human where you have no flaws and you have no vulnerability and you just go and fucking get it. You get it. Right. And then you come home and then you fuck and then you have a beautiful wife and she makes you dinner and all of this whole idea.
And that's not just in Thailand, that's here as well. That's everywhere.
Yeah, I was describing Thailand, but I think that's everywhere.
Yeah.
I think this idea makes most men that are not very educated about the new values, contemporary, healthy man, this idea makes them feel like they can't be vulnerable because they will be lesser than, they will be, less masculine, less attractive, less successful. People will like them less if they become vulnerable and start talking about the issues that they have or concerns.
And then it's so interesting then because your research is showing that it's actually the opposite, that the more we as humans across the gender and orientation and race divide, whatever, that the more as we as humans are proactive in our erotic communication, the more likely it is that we're going to have fulfilling sex lives. So the data is there to show us that actually this is the way forward. And yet there is this cohort of straight fellas in particular, hashtag not all straight men, but a lot of them, who, despite the data and research to the affirmative, will still be like, no, I'm not doing it. To their own detriment, like to cause themselves their own pain. Have you seen what happens with the men who, so obviously you've seen that the research where folks are reporting a higher level of satisfaction, and also obviously the people who are communicating more efficiently, those men who were perhaps not the gay men, or maybe they were only the gay men, how do they get out of their shell? How do they find the wherewithal to step forward and start doing this work then?
Mm-hmm. I observed into what are the precursors, antecedents to sexual communication and, effective and efficient sexual communication. And I found a couple of variables that are very interesting. Some of this was new to me, so it was really fun observing more and more and actually talking to experts of these particular topics. And the first one that I looked into, that's such a good marriage between marriage in a sense is not like government intervention, but an idea, a union of this like spiritual feeling of sexuality and sacred sexuality, as well as scientific proof and evidence of changes in physiology and desires and values and interest, is sexual mindfulness. So sexual mindfulness as a variable is like, it's not a new concept, but there's like just not a ton of scientific work behind it. the sex lab in Canada at the University of British Columbia does consistently these like experiments where it's an intervention where a group of women or men will with a certain issue. For example, this one study, it was women who had cancer and had lost their desire completely and like find it really hard to be aroused. They were enrolled in this intervention program of like sex meditation and sensation like awareness program. And the before and after is just is astounding. You know, like me reading this study, I'm like, wow, I can't believe not every single person starts sex meditating right now. If we are seeing this huge improvement from the people that have like real issues that they report, they have these issues. So my first variable, first factor that can contribute to men, women, just people becoming better at expressing their needs and desires and preferences is to become more sexually mindful. And I think this is also like in your realm of like, how can we become more mindful, right? There are so many practices, but we can perhaps talk about a couple that we know work on many different people, right? What's your favorite way to practice like mindfulness sexually?
I think one of the things that I do myself and then I teach my clients is focusing on how I want to feel straight out of the gate, more than what do I want to do. Because for me, certainly as I've gotten older and my body has changed and I'm less kind of driven by horniness than I used to be, because I'm now sort of almost in menopause, which well, I'm still on the fence waiting for the other shoe to drop. But technically, you know, I'm not a young woman anymore, which I'm cool with. But what that means for me is that my body has changed in such a way that where horniness used to be my primary driver and it was very, very robust at one time in my life, it's not so much anymore. And that has been that's been a shift. That's really been something to get used to, and a sort of an element of a grief process around that too, especially because I was such a sexual person. And it's not that I am not anymore, but my relationship to my sexuality has changed, which is phenomenal given that I have dedicated my life to studying human sexuality. In a way, it puts me in a very good position because I can handle the change probably better than somebody who was not as intellectually and emotionally prepared for the thwack that menopause is. But at the same time, the thought of having sex in the more conventional ways that I used to imagine sex, if anything, now they fill me with dread. And I just think, oh, God, I would rather give my dog a bath than have sex like that again. And it's not because I didn't used to enjoy it. I did. But it's just where I'm at in my life now. That style of sex doesn't interest me anymore. So I'm much more interested now in how do I want to feel as opposed to what do I want to do. And then I work backwards from there. And I wrote about that in my book, Sex When You Don't Feel Like It, which is not an autobiography by any stretch. But but I do draw very heavily on this principle of mindfulness around, well, when horniness is not your motivator anymore, then what? Then you're fucked, you know. And so whether you're in a situation where you've got cancer or you're middle-aged like me, or you're a younger person who's just like me about sex and you're in a relationship with somebody who wants it more often than you, which is, a lot of couples are like that. It's more about it being a quest to be seized than a problem to be solved, because I don't think there's a couple on the planet who don't have mismatched libidos. And then it's not a static thing. It's not like you're star sign where you're always going to be an Aries and they're always going to be.
Is that you?
Taurus.
Are you an Aries?
No, I'm a Libra with a lot of Scorpio. I had to think about that. No, I'm very, very Libra. Like I've got heaps of Libra in my chart, and then
that means kinky.
Libra.
Right? Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Libra is, I have a very strong intellectual interest in sex, which that is still true.
And
For
therefore,
me,
the erotic
erotic imagination is a really big thing for air signs. That's also for Aquarians too, and Geminis to a degree. But then the Scorpio want to get down and dirty, and the Scorpios are the kinky ones.
Uh-huh.
And also the Aquarians, they can be the kinky ones too. And for people listening who are like, but I'm a Capricorn. Yes, you can be kinky too. I'm not saying that you're not. I'm just saying, hypothetically. Anyway, the point being that, your erotic personality is not fixed like your star sign is. You're always going to be
100%. And I love that you said that your method of mindfulness is focusing on how you want to feel, because it takes away this pressure I think that a lot of us have. I mean, I had it one time, and I probably still do at some point, is making my partner come, like sex being a goal. And I felt this my whole life, and just recently, a couple of years ago, discovered that it's not a goal, it's an experience. And I think that even me, like talking to you right now, thinking tonight, like if I just reflect on how do I want to feel tonight, that is in itself is a way for me to be more mindful before a sexual encounter.
Right. And then I think, again, this is just my version of it, but it's when I know how I want to feel, I can then negotiate with a willing partner. And this is, I think, the other thing. One's own mindfulness can only go so far. If you're not with a partner who is willing to meet you at that level, then it's, you're still out on the ocean by yourself. But with a willing partner who is willing to experiment, who doesn't just want to always default to, but this is what we always do, and is bereft of any erotic motivation, that it's just, a bit of kissing, a bit of boob squeezing, a bit of fingering, and then a bit of whatever, and then the end, which, for people, I guess, who are into that, fine. There's nothing wrong with that if that is your jam. But if you long for more, which I know I do, you have to start operating through a lens of, well, how do you want sex to make you feel? What's your motivation? Because the mindfulness element, that for me, orgasm has almost never been a motivator for me. I don't really care about orgasms that much. And I know some people are very motivated by them, but for me, certainly in partnered sex, they've been unreliable. I haven't really expected them. I also don't demand them that much because I don't care about them. I'm way more interested in the places I can go in my mind and the places I can go in my heart. That turns me on way more than what my friend Ellen Heed calls a genital sneeze. Like I literally can do that by myself. I don't need to drag somebody else into the drama when I can just I've got machines literally in my nightstand that can do that for me, and get it over with in 5 minutes, and then I can just fall asleep if that's what I want. So my sexual mindfulness practice is much more full-bodied, I think, than the average bear. But I also think about sex in a much more robust fashion than a lot of people. So that's certainly how I do it. I don't know. What do you tell your people to do?
Yeah. What I tell my people to do is something that I do every day, which is sexual meditation. And it's easier because it doesn't take like a lot of like ingesting knowledge or information, or you can like do it right now, and you don't need a partner to do it either. You can do it alone. And also, if you feel like you don't like doing it alone in the quietness, you can pop on like a guided sexual meditation. And then you have a guide, you just listen to them and think about the things that they tell you to do. So for people that have never done sexual meditation, I strongly recommend the guided sexual meditation, because then you are not alone. Like you're listening to a guide. And I have a free version on YouTube. If anyone wants to get started with that, I have a 5-minute one, a 5-minute one, a 10-minute one. There's really simple, and just listen to me and do what I say, which is a little bit dominatrix. But
I was going to say, are you a part-time dominatrix? Which I think is a great thing, especially if you find it hard to get motivated. Somebody who's going to be in your corner going,
now do this.
Drop and give me 10. You'd be like, okay, mistress.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like you sit down. You can be naked if you want to be more vulnerable and really like touch your body. You can be in just a comfortable clothing, and you can sit comfortably and then listen to the guide. And sometimes sometimes it's about sensation. So like just focus on the nipples. Touch the nipples, like, basically massage it clockwise, then counterclockwise. It's these things where you really focus, really pay attention on one thing at a time, and breathe in and out. And it's doing that just for 5 minutes, has astounding results, from these experimental research that show how effective they can be, but also just personal experience and based on my clients' testimonials, it's been really effective. I know for me, it's the easiest thing to do in terms of tuning into just one thing and feeling more sexual. I really like it, really like sexual meditation.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing. And the principle of just paying attention to anything, longer than 5 seconds can really, enhance so many parts of our lives, including our sex lives. So, your research has found that being proactive in speaking up and sort of asking for what you want and initiating conversations about pleasure is helpful, and that sexual meditation or erotic meditation is helpful in bringing an element of mindfulness to our practice. Was there anything else that your research brought to light that is crucial to creating a fulfilling sex life?
Yes. For someone to have a fulfilling sex life is to be able to communicate, is to be able to be sexually mindful, is to be able to, talk about sex in a way that is not shameful. But how does someone even get there? My research found that the most important factor contributing to those skills or the ability to focus on sex, is sexual self-esteem.
Say more about that.
So sexual self-esteem is a similar concept to the general self-esteem, but more localized to like your sexuality. So do you feel like you are a sexual being? Do you feel like you're worthy of pleasure? Do you feel like you're a worthy partner? Do you feel positively about your own sexuality? Or do you feel a little bit ashamed about something? You could be better about something. You don't look as good. How do you feel about yourself? Is it positive? So these are kind of the elements of sexual self-esteem, which is a very nuanced concept. But generally, it's like, do you feel positive about your sexuality and how you show up as a sexual person? Which, if you survey modern people, you'll find a surprising low number for how they rate themselves sexually. Not a lot of people will rate themselves
in terms of how they look, or in terms of what they deserve, in terms of that they deserve to have pleasure bestowed upon them, or
all of those elements. So the measurement, which is this questionnaire, is like 10 items, and it encompasses like a lot of elements of someone's makeup of like their level of sexual self-esteem. So it's many different statements, and then they answer those from like 1 to 5, 1 to 5, 1 to 5. And then when you average it out, it's alarming. Most people don't find themselves that sexually attractive.
Wow. That's really unfortunate that when you're looking at it through a sort of a percentile like that how many people are affected by this idea. Do you have a sense of where this comes from? How is it that there are so many people who think they are not worthy of pleasure?
I would say media, porn, and purity culture. I would say that these are main, it's not like perhaps not a direct effect, but all together in like a pot of, stew, it makes up this like, I'm just not that pretty. I'm not sexual. I'm not Scarlett Johansson. I also don't have all these skills. Like I watch porn and damn, like this guy's so good at fucking. Like I don't have that kind of dick. I don't have that kind of skill. I don't even look like that. I gain a ton of weight. The media, like the movies show these like hot and passionate interaction. Oh, like my wife and I haven't had that for like 10 years. I'm probably unattractive. She's probably just asexual. There's so many of these things where it's indirect, but then at the end of the day, it all contributes to you feeling like you're not enough and you can't be proud of your sexuality and you can't live proudly, unapologetically sexual.
Mm. And that is, in the face of especially purity culture and then the shame culture that is perpetrated by the media across the board, all forms of media.
That's probably the biggest one.
Yeah. And that's just the thing. And I think I agree with you that certainly porn can distort some of our perceptions of sex in some ways. And then, and there's also been research to show that some of the more alt porn, especially, that has a great range of, body diversity.
I mean, I love porn. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a great thing. So it's not to say that we're not anti-porn, but that porn is a part of the broader media culture.
It's the over-reliance.
The kind of,
some
what
young
shows
men
up
watch
in
it
ads
like,
for milk is going to show up in porn, so you'll sell milk or you'll sell perfume with some hot kind of bodied person, and it's the same person or the same shape body that is also going to be in porn. So this is not just a unique to porn problem. This is a cultural problem across the board.
Definitely want to put it out there that I'm not anti-porn. I love porn.
No.
Yeah.
I hear you. And I'm also very pro porn too. I'm pro, also pro, media literacy. I think we need to be able to critique the media that we're consuming, whether it's porn or ads for, sneakers. We still need to be able to reflect on what it is that we're consuming. So as we sort of head into the home stretch with this, Dr. Tara, what's coming up next for you? Where are you orienting your professional arrow next?
Yeah, I want to be able to teach the mass, and also I'm really passionate in teaching like younger people because I'm a college professor, so I'm very used to that audience. Like I know how to engage, I know how to get their attention. So I just want to expand that to more mass and, helping more young people, teenagers, like understand their sexuality and how to communicate their sexuality, desires, preferences, boundaries. So I guess my next step is continuing to grow my podcast and my TikTok. My TikTok is at 1.3 million. So a lot of these young people are learning some type of sex positivity from me.
Do you have trouble with sex on TikTok? Because I've only just started using it like in the last 3 weeks or whatever. And the first video I made was flagged for some bullshit. And then it was flagged and then they left it up there, but they removed the audio because I said the word clitoris. And so all my subsequent videos now I have made by substituting words, because you can't, in my experience, I couldn't say anatomical words on TikTok. And I was like, what ridiculous fucking
you have
bullshit
to appeal.
is this?
Yeah.
So, but clearly, that if you can have a sex-oriented account with 1.3 million viewers, there's obviously some way around it that I haven't cracked yet. But I'm also not of the generation that TikTok is for. So, I have to look to the youngsters to work out how to do it. So
there are sex educators on there, quite a lot of sex educators on there that are doing really well. One of my friends that I talk to on my podcast is a professor at UW, University of Washington, and she also has like I think like 100,000 followers on TikTok. She also teaches sex, so I think it's going around maybe like appealing to them, like the TikTok like not the word admin, what's the word in English, leadership, like TikTok leadership, kind of writing them, or yeah, I think that would be the trick here.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm not going to do that because I primarily don't care. But I did find that very interesting that they didn't like the word clitoris, and I was just like, I don't like your attitude. So, and then I sort of left it there. That said, I've started using. I'm back on there, and I do bits and pieces, but it's certainly not a platform that I feel very enthusiastic about. But that might change. So,
but your book communicates to the mass. I think that's.
I'm much more of a words person and a literature person. That's sort of much more my jam. And also, I enjoy being able to have long form conversations with people, and deep dives is much more my style than, the couple of minutes of, razzle dazzle, which, I don't mind it. I see its purpose. It's just not my strong suit. So, yeah. Dr. Tara, it was an absolute pleasure to chat with you today. Your links are going to be in the show notes for people who want to follow you and join the Dr. Tara army on TikTok. I will also be one of them. I will come and follow you on TikTok, and hopefully I'll see you there. And I wish you all the best with your further research and your further academic career. And maybe I'll meet up with you in Bangkok one time and eat some delicious Thai food, which I haven't been back to Thailand in years. So I'm really looking forward to spending some time there again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a really fun conversation. I had a great time, and I look forward to seeing you in Thailand.
Thanks, Dr. Tara.
Bye.